is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Broadchurch, Season 2, Episode 4. In this episode, Susan comes back and she decides to stick to her guns about seeing her son. I can't tell if this is just revenge. Is she blackmailing him somehow? What is she doing? Also, Sandbrook is a mess. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Jessie for commissioning this episode and rolling with me having to reschedule it abruptly. Really appreciate you being understanding on that. And I was disappointed to not get to talk about it because this was a really eventful, revealing episode. So I'm going to talk about what's going on in the Sandbrook case first, because that's sort of the least focused of the stories so far. We know what actually happened with Danny and, oh my God, what is his name? I keep wanting to call her husband Todd because he just looks like a Todd to me. I can't remember his name. I don't know if anybody's in the chat to help me out, but regardless, we know how that went down. We saw his confession. We saw the film, like a depiction of what occurred, which I'm going to assume that this show doesn't engage in the kind of like fake outs that some do. Because there are some shows that'll show you on camera something that a person claims happened. And it will simply be a depiction of the story the person's telling. And you'll find out later, oh, no, they weren't telling the truth. We just showed you what they claimed. And I think that this show tends to be like, we're going to show you the thing that happened. We aren't going to tell you a story and trick you. Not that there's anything wrong with tricking us, because that can be really fun. That's a fun device. But I don't think this is the kind of show to do that. So I am just going off of his confession and everything that he said meaning that Susan's son isn't actually involved at all. And that's like its own other conversation to discuss her motives. Sandbrook is still a total mystery to us. We have no idea what really happened there. We are getting nothing but like conflicting stories coming off of, oh my God, guys, it's been so long since I covered this that now I'm forgetting everybody's names. I know D.I. Hardy, I know Ellie, and now I'm trying to remember, Lee Ashworth and what's-her-face, his wife. Claire, right? Claire. So Claire's story is the one that's really changed the most. And Claire, for me, is also the one that has felt the most suspicious in terms of her attitude. There's just something about the way that she, like, interacts with people that feels a little bit sociopathic to me. And when I say that, I mean that I don't feel like she has the normal reaction to some things, or doesn't seem to like pick up on cues sometimes about the compassionate way to respond. And she just seems like really self-absorbed sometimes. Her like fear of Lee Ashworth doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like I'm afraid of him because I genuinely think he's a murderer and dangerous and he's toxic for me, but I can't resist him, which is the story she's telling. I don't feel it. I think there's something else. And I don't know what it is, but there's a vibe of like combination, I think, that she is still really drawn to him, and that's legitimate and true. But there's something about her trying to resist getting involved with him again that feels like it's dangerous to her for a different reason. It's not her safety I think she's even worried about. because I don't believe that he actually committed the murder. I may be wrong. And if I get proven wrong by the end of this, I mean, I'm always kind of enjoying being proven wrong on TV shows because I like surprises and not knowing what's going to happen. So I won't be mad about it at all. I'll actually probably be delighted. But it just feels too much like if there is anything that she is keeping from D.I. Hardy about Lee, it isn't even necessarily related to the Sandbrook case. He might have just been involved in some shit on his own that was totally separate, you know? I don't know. So, you know what? I'm going to pull up the IMDb, since it doesn't seem like there's anybody in the chat right now, in case I, need people's names pretty desperately. Season 2, Episode 4. I am very curious about the parents of the murdered girl. So, let's see. I'm trying to see what their names are. Jocelyn is the lawyer. Maggie is the editor. See full cast. They're going to be pretty far down this list. It doesn't really matter. So the parents of the murdered girl are divorced. It turns out that the mother is still living in the house where she disappeared from. And Ellie expresses a little bit of surprise over that. And he says she's wants to be here in case her daughter comes back. And it's very heartbreaking on the one hand, because most people just assume that she's dead. But I don't think she is. I don't know. Because she had two. And the one turned up dead and the other vanished. Everyone is assuming the older daughter was also killed and they just didn't discover her body. I can't help but wonder if something didn't go down with her and her sister, and that's why she disappeared. And I don't mean to say that I think that she was, framing anybody on purpose. There is a thing where Lee Ashworth's hair turned up on the pillow, and there was no real explanation for it. I saw the way that her and Lee were looking at each other. He might have been having an affair with her. If he was, maybe it's Claire who got jealous and killed the older girl. I don't know why the younger daughter, would have been involved at all, though. Claire, if she is actually a murderer, she doesn't strike me as a fool. And I don't think that she would have involved another party and put herself at risk that way if she could have avoided it. So I just don't like that motivation of jealousy. It's something that feels vaguely right, but the way that I'm picturing it doesn't exactly line up, unless we're going to go with the theory that Claire had murdered the older sister and then was interrupted somehow by the younger sister and was put in a position to have to kill her in order to shut her up. But if that were the case, whatever method she used to dispose of the elder sister's body, she could have used on the younger too, and then they both would not have been found. So why does only one get discovered? The elder daughter's disappearance, for me, is really the key to this whole thing. And it's really compelling to me that nobody really seems to be looking for her anymore, because they all really do believe that she is dead. I understand why in cases like this that is often that's just, unfortunately, after a certain window of time, the likelihood of recovering someone alive is very, very low. So it makes sense. But nobody really seems to think she might have been responsible for what happened to her sister. And it's interesting to me to consider someone trying to kill both sisters. That's a real, that feels different than luring away a teenage girl and trying to rape her or assault her somehow. As far as I remember, I feel like Alex says that there wasn't sexual assault of the girl that he did find. So it just doesn't feel like it's as simple as that. It doesn't seem like, they were being stalked by somebody in the way that women are often stalked. It feels like if they're both involved, something went awry, And we also find out this episode about the discovery of the body. So what I had said in the first episode, the very first episode, and it's because the just directing of this show is so good, I guessed that there's a moment where Alec is looking at his cup of tea, and the partially submerged tea bag, seems to trigger something, and he gets upset. And I said at the time, I feel like he discovered a body in water, or somebody he knows, it just immediately, that was where my mind went. And it turns out that's exactly what it was. And I really love that the show was able to convey something that huge with such a small scene and really get it across. And, his fear of water is an ongoing thing. And he had almost drowned trying to retrieve her body. So it all makes total sense why he would be uncomfortable around water after something like that. He wakes up from a dream of drowning, and I used to have a recurring dream that I was drowning and would wake up absolutely gasping out of breath. It was the worst. So there was something weirdly chilling about seeing somebody else experience a similar dream. I haven't had it in years now, but it used to happen a few times a year. It was a fairly frequent dream. And he is really obviously tortured by the fact that this girl that was killed is the same age as his daughter. And he found her after she had already been in the river for 3 days. And so she was really rotted away. And he's really just, the scene where he wakes up from a dream of drowning and then he just turns over onto his side and starts crying is really effective. It's just one of those, how I understand so much people wanting to contain their emotions. We haven't really, we can tell from his actions that this case still haunts him. The fact that he is still looking into it after all this time, the fact that it destroyed his family and he's still sort of willing to go back into it. Those all indicate that he is very invested and wants to pursue this. However, he doesn't show an emotional response to it in front of people. And this is one of the first times that we really see it. And it's just, because we haven't up to now, it's so hard to watch. There's Maggie Smith tends to play really uptight characters that have excellent self-control. And it makes it so much more upsetting every time she breaks and starts to cry in a scene. And that's kind of how I feel about David Tennant, because he doesn't play this sort of sad role often. He is usually cast as somebody who is angry or a smartass. And so him doing this scene, it just felt like a punch. It really did. So he convinces Ellie to check out the family. He, first of all, has made a copy of the keys of Lee Ashworth's house, Lee and Claire's place, so that she can go in there and snoop around. She goes in, and the place is very under-furnished, and it's unclear how much stuff has been removed since they left, because there's like a pile of mail on the floor behind the door, which really indicates to me that nobody has been in there. So if this is how they were living, it doesn't feel like they're permanent. They feel like they don't own very much. And are they the type to like travel around to find victims? Because there are, like I posited this theory, the Moores murders, I think is what they were called. They were a couple who targeted kids together and tortured and killed them together. And that was like their pastime as a couple. I don't think that's what's going on with Claire and Lee, but I don't know. You know, it's how can you ever tell that sort of thing? And if it were that, then them not having a ton of like possessions, furniture, things like that, because they go from place to place would make sense. But if they go from place to place, I guess that would have shown up in Alex's investigation, and he would have taken note of their residencies corresponding with wherever there had been a murder that was similar to this. So probably there's nothing to that theory. It was just weird to me because, you know, Lee Ashworth and Claire are probably a little older than me, or maybe around my age, and I have enough furniture in my house that it doesn't look like a dorm. They feel like they're in their teens. They've got a futon and like a stand-up lamp from IKEA and a really simple coffee table, and there's almost nothing else in the room other than the TV in the living room, you know, things like that. But again, I don't know how much stuff was taken and stripped and sold and searched and confiscated as evidence. I don't know. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall, Alec is talking to the girl's mother, and she drops a bomb on him. This is one of those things that I really don't... It's not even that I don't believe it, because people are idiots, you know, and it's probably something that happens. But it's really hard for me to buy that this woman wants justice for her daughters this much, but kept something so crucial from the police. So what we find out is basically that her husband is a womanizing piece of shit. It's not just that he cheated on her, it's that he made it a point to let her know about it. She says something about how he would flirt with Claire over the fence and he'd check to make sure she was watching. So it was a power thing for him. It wasn't just like, I just really like to fuck and women are gorgeous, which is still despicable, but also just feels like, well, you're just weak. When you're going after somebody that way, you're trying to like manipulate and control them and make like lower their self-esteem. It just feels like a different motivation to what he's doing. So she says this, and then she says, even on the night his daughter was dying. And D.I. Hardy is like, wait, what? And she says, we went to a wedding and he was banging the bridesmaid. So he was not with her at the time of the murder. And she assumed he was banging a bridesmaid. Now, why? Because he told her? This is why what I mean when I say I don't know how much I buy this as a storyline. You, as a woman, have to be aware that like the men closest to women and female children tend to be the biggest threats. And it just doesn't quite land for me that her husband, being the kind of piece of shit he was, that it wouldn't at least enter her mind he wasn't where he said he was. And maybe he's the one. You don't want to think it, but you can't help it. You know? Like, if something were to happen to, let's say, a member of Owen's family, it doesn't matter that I know them and wouldn't expect anything like that from one of them. I would still be deeply suspicious of any men connected to it at all. And I don't apologize for that. Men, you brought this on yourselves by, as a group, either being terrible or defending others who are terrible. Like, you just tend to do this. So I don't think that that is an unreasonable reaction. And we saw that happening with Beth. You know, she was seeing that Mark had no alibi, and she straight up asked him, did you do it? She really seemed to be willing to entertain the idea, even though it was, we know it wasn't, and he was horrified that she would even think that. But I understand why she would think that. You never know. And I just don't know if I buy that this woman would have kept key alibi, information like that from the cops this whole time and never would have said anything. When D.I. Hardy is like, why did you not tell us this? She says something like, what did it have to do with you? And I'm like, what do you mean, what did it have to do? It had everything to do with them. You just said while his daughter was dying. You just said it yourself. You know what it had to do with them. What are you talking about? It was just, I don't know. It makes me wonder if she isn't the one, because it just feels so wrong to me. I can't help but think that is her attempting to point the finger pretty hard. And if there was something going on with him and Claire, was she attempting to frame Lee or Claire in an effort to get back at them somehow? Now, choosing to use her daughters to do it takes everything to a totally different level, which is psychotic. But I don't know. There's just something about her willingness to give this cop who has shown up and says he's reopening this investigation something that's that huge a bomb and that juicy, and act like it's totally reasonable that she hasn't said anything. It just feels wrong. Something not right about this bitch. I don't like it. Combined with the fact that, it feels like this episode is really trying to point us towards her husband as the potential killer. There are two things that happen. One, we see the photo of this area full of bluebells in his office behind him, which we know that the bluebells are significant. We still don't know how, but I am assuming they were, a field of them was near where the bodies were found, or body was found. And the other thing is that the phone number Ellie got off of Claire's phone is this woman's husband's phone number. And so Ellie calls it, and his number just rings. Excuse me. But we see him sitting at the desk and not picking up the phone. I found that particularly interesting. It could be nothing that he doesn't pick up, because God knows most of us we operate differently now. It used to be a phone would ring and you would sprint across the house to get that shit before somebody hung up, because you didn't have a machine way back in the day. Or if you did, people would hang up before the machine went. And if you didn't catch it, you would never know who it had been. Nowadays, we can look at our phone and immediately see, oh, I don't know that person. They're not in my contacts. I'm not answering that. Even more, there's services that you can sign up for that will tell you potential spam, or they'll just tell you what city it's in. And if you know nobody from that city, you can pretty much guarantee, oh, this is definitely not for me. This is a telemarketer. So it may just be that he can see on the caller ID that it's not a number he recognizes and figures they can leave a message. Or he can see perhaps the location of the phone, and because she has to register the phone that she's calling from when she gets her plan. Would he see that and realize that somebody connected to D.I. Hardy was onto him at all? Or I don't know if it would tick anything off for him, but I don't think so. Also, the other thing, in combination with Claire having his number and the photo with the bluebells, is him trying to get D.I. Hardy to stop with the reopening of the case. And that's really the thing that Alec is sort of zeroing in on, is this man claims that he wants justice for his daughters. And yet, I'm trying to reopen this investigation, and he clearly does not want that. What is that about? And I understand that reaction. I mean, outside of knowing what I do about this man's wife and the way that she's feeding D.I. Hardy what feels like too good to be true, like pointed fingers, I do think that I would react the same exact way and be like, oh, it's interesting that you seem so worried about it. That said, there could be a lot of reasons. It might be that he does know what happened, and he is trying to protect somebody. Like, what if his daughter is still alive? And what if let's say his wife did it. What if she killed their daughter, their youngest, and he helped his eldest daughter to flee? Then he wouldn't want Hardy poking around, because he might be able to, like, get out enough information to locate this girl who is safe and somewhere else and reveal her to her mother when she doesn't want to be revealed, without actually figuring out who the killer really was. So just exposing this girl to danger for no actual gain, like the villain going to jail, you know? 'Cause that's like, I don't know what, it's so weird to me how his wife says, like, he used to flirt with Claire over the fence and make sure that I was watching. And we saw the way that, like I said, Lee was looking at the eldest daughter through the window, and she comes up behind her daughter at one point and sort of shoos her out of the window because she can see this guy is leering at her, and gives Lee a very disapproving look, like she knows what the fuck he's doing. I have seen that look on my own mother's face several times growing up. And it's just such an odd overlap of sexual interest from both sides to different people that I don't know what to make of it. You know, was the daughter actually sleeping with Lee? Was she interested in sleeping with Lee, or did she just have a crush on him? Did Claire know? It seemed like she saw him and the way that he was looking at the girl. But Claire, like, they have a conversation about how many people they've each slept with since they've seen the other. And neither of them is very honest with one another, I don't think. She tells him none. But we saw her with that dude. Now, maybe she didn't fuck him, but I'm pretty sure she fucked him. Like, come on. So she says none. And he asks if French girls count. So I don't know. Honestly, if going off of the way they behave, I feel like Lee Ashworth is the more honest of the two. And yet, I bet he's lying and he didn't sleep with anybody, while she's lying because she definitely slept with a bunch of people. I don't know why I have that vibe, but he just seems so obsessed with Claire that him never having sex with anybody else because he's dying to get back to her so badly would read as fair to me. I mean, it's only been a couple years since that case, right? And that's not really that long to go without sleeping with anybody if you are in love with a person that you can't have right now. If it had been longer, then I'd be like, well, maybe. But I don't know. Maybe he did. Who knows? He's certainly very fine. Lots of women would turn to look at him. So because of that interaction and the fact that neither of them is honest, I can't get a read on what their sexual relationships are like. Like, are they monogamous with one another? Are they interested in, like, bringing other people into the bedroom, or are they allowed to sleep with other people? And is it something that they are each aware of and simply leave them to their devices? And, you know, like, there is a possessiveness to him that doesn't necessarily feel monogamous. And she certainly doesn't seem to view it that way. So I don't know. It's hard to say. And the fact that the wife seems outside of both, you know, she's not the one that Lee is checking out and grinning at. And she's also not the one that her husband is checking out and grinning at. It sets her outside of everything in a way that just makes me look at her. I don't really have any true theories, though. I'll be honest. It just feels suspect, so that's all. So, also, Lee is like following Ellie around, and he tells Ellie that Alec slept with Claire. And I said that. I thought that was what was going on when I saw the two of them together in that cottage the first time. There was just something about the way that he stands near her and looks at her. All of his body language is somebody who has had access to this person in a way that is outside of just social or an investigation where you're trying to maintain a professional distance. And so I assumed that they either were sleeping together or had slept together. I even wondered if she was his wife before we find out who she actually is. And it's pretty clear because of how Alec is refusing to reply to Ellie's question repeatedly that is indeed what happened. And I get the feeling he really regrets it. So this is part of my theory about the fact that, like, it seems that there's something going on with the way that Claire utilizes sex. And I would not be surprised if she was able to sort of, like, emotionally manipulate Alec into sleeping with her as a reaction to him finding out that his wife was having an affair. And maybe him feeling like he wants to get a little bit of revenge. That is not uncommon. You know, a lot of couples, if they find out one of the other is cheating, then that person feels like, well, I should have the right to go fuck somebody then. I've been being good and look what that got me. So maybe I should just go be bad. Why not? And I wouldn't be surprised if she had seemed like vulnerable and just, you know, needing saving in a way that was appealing to him. And she knew that and maybe utilized that somehow. Because she just seems too calculating. I don't feel like that would be an accident. I don't feel like it would just be like, oh, well, we just had a few too many that one night and, you know, the fire, like, I don't buy it. Not her. I just don't see it. And it seems pretty clear to me that he regrets it. I just don't. When you are in that kind of emotional upheaval, you know, him finding out that his wife had cheated on him, you do things because you're angry and hurt. And you want to, like, get some control back. You want to feel like you are in charge of anything. And that is often one of the things people reach for to make themselves feel better. And so that's my other theory. It's like, yeah, they slept together, but she was trying to, like, get something out of him. And he was in a bad state when he did it. And he wishes he hadn't. But she still does have a little bit of a hold over him from it. Because I think part of his regret is feeling maybe like he took advantage of her also. That said, it's not like he's not open to the idea that she might have been the murderer. So maybe he thinks that she did this to, you know, think, oh, she couldn't possibly be the one, you know. But Alec isn't an idiot, and I'm sure that's not actually how it worked for him in his head. I don't know. Anyway, okay, so that is all mixed in with the moment with Oliver and Lee. You guys, Oliver, this motherfucker. I'm so disgusted. The show begins with Oliver making a bad call and tweeting something that he shouldn't without checking because he knew what he would be told. And I really gave him the benefit of the doubt at that time that he was feeling stifled and frustrated and he made a bad call one time and immediately realized that it was a bad call and tried to take it back. But the thing is, as this goes on, it becomes clearer and clearer that he is kind of a heartless opportunist. And I really like the line that Alec has, which was, you people think you're doing something noble, but you just make the world harder to live in. Because there is something to be said about journalism being noble at times. There are so many things that risks journalists take that I admire, and really the guts that investigating certain things, despite being like warned off in a variety of violent ways, I'm sure. I think that is admirable. It's people trying to get information that they feel folks have a right to for any number of reasons. But when it's things like this, what he's doing is he first goes to Alec's little cabin and shows him the clippings of Lee Ashworth and is like, oh, I figured out who that dude is who came in to like place an ad with us. And he's needling Alec. And I love, Alec says something like, does your editor know you're here? And he says, I'm getting a little tired of the way you talk to me. To which I'm like, well, then maybe stop being a piece of shit. Like, it's not his attitude that's the problem. It's that you are consistently shitty. And as it turns out, no, she doesn't know. She has no idea about any of this. And he is pushing the envelope, fully aware that what he's doing is wrong and out of bounds. He is doing it's better to ask forgiveness than ask permission. So he, after getting nothing out of Alec, he goes and tracks down Lee and takes a photo of him working on his fence without his consent. And this is one of those things that it falls in an area where if Lee tried to raise objections to this photo, he wouldn't have a leg to stand on in like American law. I don't know how it would work in the UK, but in American law, if you are not inside private property where you have what's called like a reasonable expectation of privacy, you are like free game to be photographed. And that is one of the more infuriating applications of that law was men who would put small cameras, mirrors, etc. on their shoes and try and get upskirt videos of girls. And they went to court over it, and the court ruled that the girls did not have a legal expectation of privacy because they were out. And if somebody could see up their skirt, that's what happens when you wear a skirt. It was like just one of the more disgusting things I've ever read. So the fact that Ali comes here and takes his photo, Lee doesn't, like, he can't do anything about that. And Lee refuses to speak to Ollie. No quotes given, which good for him. But it's enough to have the photo and raise the issue of this previous case. And like, people in general began to figure out who Alec was, but only because they were getting to know him personally or had gotten to know other victims. Like Beth goes and finds the mother of a woman who lost her son or daughter, and she finds out who D.I. Hardy is from that woman. I don't think it's necessarily common knowledge in town that Alec was involved in Sandbrook. It's like, it's out there, but I don't feel like everybody's talking about it. And now that there's this photo, I feel like it's going to blow up again. And there's going to be a lot more focus on Alec in reference to everything else that's happening, you know? So this is just bad news because Lee wants to be left alone. I don't know if he deserves to be left alone, but that's what he wants. And Alec wants to work on, like, continuing to investigate that case in peace. And it doesn't look like he's going to be granted that either, probably. And I am just so disgusted with Ollie here because it is one thing to find out, for example, about like the Flint pipes and what actually happened with the fact that everybody has been poisoned and the water is still not clean. That's journalism that matters and is on behalf of human rights. What Ollie is doing is objectively, he is pestering and harassing someone who was exonerated by the law. and making their life more difficult for no reason other than he wants to get some content up that nobody else has. It's absolutely solely driven by his desire to one-up other sites and to one-up his boss a little bit, let's be honest, because she is pretty outraged when she finds out that he posted this shit. So it's just super selfish and really shitty and not actually accomplishing anything. And I don't feel like he even really wants to accomplish anything. Perhaps he would like to continue to look into the Sandberg case and make a name for himself with that. But considering how everything is going with Danny's case, I wouldn't really count on it, my dude. You know, I'm just disgusted with him. I'll just say it. I really am. Like, so annoyed. And I was very pleased at how harsh Maggie was with him because she was also very disgusted. And then, like I said, I already referenced basically the fact that Lee and Claire sleep together again by the end of the episode. He gets her like a favorite pastry or something and leaves it at her door. And I love when he goes and like sits against the door at one point and just says in a regular tone of voice, "How is it?" And I like that he says it like that because it indicates that he knows she's right there. And she doesn't jump, indicating that she knows he's right there. So it's a moment to me of each of them just knowing each other well enough to assume how the other would behave, which just indicates how close they are. And then when she opens the door, the way he just attacks her, it just, the chemistry between the two of them is very good. It really does feel like she has wanted to fuck him for so long and it's killing her not being able to, you know? So I guess good for them. And while they're having sex, he says something like, "What did you tell him?" And she says nothing. And he says, "For your sake, I hope you're telling the truth," which makes him sound very threatening because it makes it sound like, for your sake, if I find out you were lying, I will hurt you. But what if he means for your sake, because I know you did it and I hope you didn't fuck up? You know, like, who knows? So that's pretty much everything with the two of them. Let's go back to the actual trial, shall we? Not even just the trial. Let's just go back to the Danny storyline. Most heartbreaking part of this episode for me was Mark telling Tommy that he is not going to hang out with him anymore. This for me was really ugly. He just is this plus like having the affair. It just really feels like Mark is someone who uses people and doesn't consider what it does to them. And he just seems pretty selfish. And I wish that he would, the way that he leaves, he dumps Tom, basically. And it's just like, people will get the wrong idea, which I said also. But if you were to do this with like supervision and invite Tom over to their house, for example, where Beth could also hang out with him, maybe she would find it comforting too. Instead, it feels like he wanted to hang on to Danny mentally for as long as he could. And once he realized that that wasn't going to work, he just decided, all right, well, I guess I'll just let it go, without considering that he had involved like another human being in his effort to hang on to Danny. There's a kid here, a kid who has lost a lot. His best friend was killed by his own father. And even though there's a moment where he says to Susan, he says he didn't do it. Susan, like, she has a moment of giving him a little bit of a pitying look before saying, they all say that. And you see him sort of fold, because I think he knows for sure that his dad did it. And he is just wanting anybody out there to be like, well, maybe he didn't. And I don't know if anybody has actually lied to him that way. I think everybody knows full well that his dad did it. And I really, I don't know what you do with a kid that age whose parent is clearly guilty when the kid is trying to claim that their father didn't do it. Do you even address it at all? Do you lie and say, maybe he didn't, sweetie, even though the man literally confessed to police? Do you change the subject and just try to not talk about it? Or are you honest and be like, sweetie, he confessed, he did it. I know that it sucks. It's really upsetting, traumatizing, but you've got to cope with that. And I'm wondering, because, we don't really know the reasoning behind him and Ellie growing apart. Is it because he truly does not believe that his dad did it? And the fact that his mother doesn't have the same blind faith is what's made him abandon her because he's angry at her? Because if that's what it is, that's just so sad. It's not even, I'm not mad at him. Who wants to believe this about a parent? It's just horrifying. And that's probably part of why Ellie is hasn't given up on him, because I think she believes that he will come around. I also wonder if that's part of why she had such a reaction when he pleads not guilty. I think I had assumed at the time that her reaction was solely based on how much she wanted this to be over. And that once he got sentenced, that would be it. But I think it was more than just, I want the trial to be over, or not even the trial. I want this whole, I think she wanted her son to see his father say he was guilty in order to start the process of him believing her again. And maybe her getting closer to him again. And instead, now this man is claiming his innocence, and it's going to create more of a rift between the two of them, because that feels like a real betrayal. If the fact that you are saying that you're innocent, we know that he hasn't seen his son, right? He asks the Reverend to bring Tommy to visit, and the Reverend's like, yeah, I don't think that's appropriate at all, actually, no. But it seems like from the way this scene went that maybe Tommy is sort of on his side. I just hated seeing Mark dump him like this. Doesn't even present an alternative for hanging out and keeping him involved with the family. It was purely a private thing. And then once he can't have it exactly like that anymore, he's just about to cut him off. And it's just, to me, it's unforgivable. And the trailer that they had been meeting in was Susan's, and Tommy is hanging out there, and Susan comes home really unexpectedly. And I kind of liked, Susan has really grown on me over time. She is so unpleasant, but based on the way things went down, our knowledge of what she went through, it makes me a lot more sympathetic to how angry she was at police in general. I have my own reasons for hating cops, but it's not from personal experience. It's just observation. But she has her own, story of destruction in her history from them. So that, on that front, just, warms me to her. And then there's the fact that, she's unpleasant in her overall manner a lot of the time, but there is a directness that I appreciate. And she is cooking. I think she's cooking for herself and Tommy. I'm not sure. But they're chatting over the whole thing. And basically she's like, well, you can't use this place anymore. I don't want visitors. And as much as it sucks for him to get this news, I just liked how direct she was about it. Just yeah, no, that's not going to work for me. And also, there's this energy of wishing that she could help this kid, because she is seeing what would have happened if her family had stayed together and her husband had been caught. And I think that she has a real sympathy for Tommy, even though it doesn't look like she does. And I just find her sort of interesting. Now, that said, what happens later is very puzzling to me. She goes and meets her alleged son. I can't remember his name. Bald-headed, who is the weird actor who always vaguely looks like he's smiling, and I just don't like his acting. I've just come to realize, I just don't like this character very much, actually. But she meets him on the beach and tells him that she's got about 9 months to live. She's dying. And he laughs and says that he doesn't believe her. Honestly, I understand that. You know, if you're dealing with somebody who's trying to get your attention and they have failed in a lot of other methods, then this is something that a person who doesn't have scruples would attempt to do. Nicholas says, Nigel, thank you. Yes, Nigel, thank you. I have actually had a guy try this on me to get me to sleep with him. He pretended that he was terminally ill, and it wasn't like one of the joke, oh, I'm gonna pretend this thing, but make it really obvious that it's a joke. I just want to sleep with you so bad that he actually faked that he was terminally ill. And I found out later he had tried this on multiple other women, and it didn't always fail, unfortunately. So his suspicion on that, I understand. But based on the surprise when she turns to look at him and then her face changing and saying, nice, I really think she's telling the truth. And it didn't even occur to her that he would think she was lying. And she just doesn't really know what to say to that, you know? And she stands by that she saw him carrying the body. And eventually goes on the stand and bears witness against him, which I have to admit, I don't know what that's about. This dude, was she paid? Is that what happened? I don't know what her motivation would be. The one reason that I could see her doing this is telling Nigel, I'll retract my testimony if you agree to attempt a relationship with me. But I mean, there's no surer way to make somebody not want to attempt a relationship with you than accusing them of murder on international television. I'm sure that this case is getting attention. I would assume. I don't know, maybe not. But I just don't know why. If she's trying to repair things between the two of them, she says to him, you don't turn on family. And he says, you're not my family. Is that what does it for her? She's like, oh, fine. If you're not family, then I guess I'll just go ahead and say this shit. But that doesn't make sense because she was willing to say this back when she was still considering them family, because she allegedly was so concerned that he had taken after his father. So I don't know. But she is brought in by the defense as a means of moving the focus off of Tom as being the main suspect. It is Tom, right? I'm telling you guys, like I said, it's been over a month since I covered the last episode, and I forgot even what the villain's name is. The defense realizes that if they are going to say that he isn't guilty, they have to have somebody to present that they say is guilty. And I was sort of wondering about this before. Usually that's what you do, and they hadn't presented an alternate set of facts, an alternate theory on what happened. And this, it turns out, is going to be their what do we say? Hail Mary, when you just go for it and hope for the best. And the reason that they have to do something like this is, one, Jocelyn comes up with a pretty great witness at the last second that they don't have any means of preventing from coming up on the stand. And this is a witness who worked in the, with the ambulance unit as a partner to Tom. And she gives a statement about witnessing him lose his temper over a parking spot, leaping out of a car, punching a man in the face, and then when the man hits the ground, he started kicking him. The kind of rage that if you are threatened, maybe you killed a child. She says if he hadn't been stopped, he would have killed him. That's how ferocious the attack was. He broke the man's ribs, left him in intensive care. It's a pretty damning piece of evidence. It's not even evidence. It's a character witness. And the defense isn't really prepared. And they try this weak, how many lives has he saved sort of thing. But thankfully, this woman on the stand isn't about to be played that way. And it's that doesn't make what he did right. And he, I was scared out of my life. He almost killed him. She keeps talking even when she's been asked to stop. And I think just completely screws them. And so this is why they're trying to find an alternate story, The thing with Jocelyn, so we get another little moment here in this episode of her vision blurring again. It's done in a pretty interesting way, too. It's wherever she's looking directly, she can't see. But the outside of that circle of where she's attempting to look is clear. And I'm just really curious about what it's going to turn out is going on. Does she have a brain tumor that's affecting her vision? Is it purely something going on with her eyes? She is accused of being, I think by Maggie. Maggie says something like, you're stewing in self-pity. And I want to know what the deal is there. I have been assuming that whatever she was stewing about was it sort of involved Sharon. Sharon, when Jocelyn tells Sharon, I'm actually going to be prosecuting, Sharon is absolutely flabbergasted because clearly she fully expected that this wasn't even a consideration for Jocelyn. And then says something like, so for me, you won't. And I am remembering her son, I think, in prison. And I'm wondering if she tried to get Jocelyn to help her with that case. And Jocelyn refused for some reason. And is there something going on with that means that is part of her stewing in self-pity? Or is it a medical issue that she's dealing with? I don't think it's that because it doesn't seem like she's told anyone about it. But I don't know. I'm just very curious on that. And Beth comes to her house and brings her food and asks her why she changed her mind. And she says, Tom hired a pit bull to defend him. And Danny used to deliver my newspaper. And I'm like, that's not it though, is it? Because he had been the kid who delivered your newspaper when you said no. And it has to be who he chose. We saw your reaction when it was announced that it was going to be Sharon. But she's just not telling Beth the truth or the whole story. And I'm dying to know what all is going on. I really, really want to know the history here. Because there's a sense of Sharon blaming her for her son being in jail. And I don't know if I'm reading into that too much or what. And then let's see. Oh, and I almost forgot. Sharon also attempts with her partner, Fleabag, to examine Tom as if he were on the stand and give him a test run as to how he does, because they want to decide whether to put him up or not, whether he will be credible, whether he projects innocence, all of that. And they talk to him and it's really bad. He's just very shifty. He, literally shifty, moving around in his seat a lot, not making eye contact, swallowing, adjusting, reframing his sentence, changing things a little bit. He's just not good. And they walk out of there and Sharon says he was a disaster. There's no way we're putting him up there. And Fleabag says, oh my God, he's guilty. And I was really startled because I had assumed they knew he was guilty already. I think Sharon did, because she doesn't have a reaction to that like piece of information. She reacts to Fleabag saying it out loud. You know, it's not like she's like, oh my God, do you think so? It's her being like, don't you fucking say that. Never say that. He deserves his defense. And this is the difference between a lawyer and someone like me, like a trial lawyer. I considered going into the legal profession because I am very big on, first of all, just arguing. Second of all, semantics. Third of all, the letter of an agreement and figuring out loopholes around it. I always love that, like in theory. But in terms of that, he deserves his defense. I do not side with the law. You know, like I understand that that legally is true. But as far as I'm concerned, the man confessed. He doesn't deserve shit. And so I couldn't do a job like this. I couldn't set aside the knowledge that somebody was actually guilty and that I'm defending them and trying to prove they're not when I am aware they are. Whether or not the law says they deserve a defense has nothing to do with my choice to pretend to everyone that he didn't. I couldn't do it. And I wonder if that was part of the deal with Jocelyn. Did she ask to get done, like to get in? Was she asked by Sharon to get involved with something when she knew the person was guilty and she refused to do it? Do they have that sort of like dissonance with, were they partners the way it seemed? I don't know. So I got to wrap up. I'm out of time. But again, thank you very much to Jessie for commissioning this. I'm sorry that I had to postpone, but I appreciate your patience on it. And everybody, I will be seeing you. Let's see, when's the next one? I'll be seeing you on Tuesday with the next episode. Yay, it's coming right up. All right, everyone. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.